Hello and welcome to a new know-how webcast from the DTI Switzerland. Our company is specialized in enterprise search technologies and Microsoft SharePoint. We hope you will enjoy this webcast. Whenever you will have questions, do not hesitate to get in contact with us on ask@dti.ch.
Hello and welcome to a new webcast from DTI Switzerland. My name is Stefan and I will guide you today through the process of installing a development farm on SharePoint 2013. Normally this is a straightforward process, but there are some tricks you should know that you successfully can establish the environment within 1 hour or less. Okay, let's start with a short overview on my development environment. I created a web application called dev.example.local, and the root side of it is based on a developer site template. I do not have any apps uploaded up to now to this site. There are no apps in testing, and there are also no apps deployed, whether SharePoint hosted nor provider hosted apps. Okay, I then will open Visual Studio and start developing a new app for SharePoint 2013. For this, I open a new project and choose the right templates from SharePoint Office 2013 and apps. As you can see here, we will have Office apps and SharePoint apps, and I choose app for SharePoint 2013. After that, I change the location and the name of the solution, and after that, I will configure all the needed settings. So first of all, I provide a name for the app, which is much more user-friendly. I will choose a website for debugging and validate it. It's very important that it has to be validated successfully. And I switch from auto-hosted to SharePoint hosted. After that, I create the project and Visual Studio will build up all the needed infrastructure. Just let's test it and click on Start and see what will happen. As you can see, there were development errors. I don't continue and I will have a look for the error message, which is called error occurred in deployment uninstall app. Only users who can view pages can list apps. So that means the actual user I am logged on seems not to have necessary rights on the site collection where I want to debug. So I test the user I'm logged on with. And I will navigate to the site collection to see if I will have access with my account. As you can see here, I do not have access to this site, so of course the deployment cannot work correctly. So next step is to provide the necessary permissions for this account to the site, and regarding the error message, it should be a member only because a member can view pages. So we will test that, go to the site members and add our account to this group. Okay, let's go back to the site and see if we can access it. Yes, so access is given. So let's see if we can start the solutions again. Oops, and unfortunately, again, we will have an error. So let's have a look. This time it's saying only site administrators may install or uninstall apps. This is the right error message. The message before was a little bit misleading because we do not need only viewing rights, we also need the right to install and uninstall apps. So I edit now the administrator and start it again. And in this case, now we get a complete other error message, so we can assume that this time the rights are given. So what is the error message? The error message is app management shared service proxy is not installed. Let's have a look to this issue next. So when you want to develop apps for SharePoint and host apps on SharePoint 2013, you need a service which is called App Management Shared Service. So you can create this service within the Service Application Framework, and if we go to the application services on my server, you can see that there is no app management service yet. The next step we will do is we create a new app management service. We will fill in all needed information like service application name, database name and database server, as well as information for the application pool and the managed account which will be used for this pool running the service. Now when we want to create the service, we also need an application proxy which will be connected to the specific web applications using this service. After a short while, the service will be created and we can see it in the list of our service applications. Next step we will have to do is we have to go to our system settings, go to manage services on server and have a look if the service itself is running. Okay, in this case it started. It has been started automatically by the service by creating it, but you should always be sure that you control if this service is running. So the next service we also need is called the subscription service, and unfortunately we cannot create it via the UI, so we have to use PowerShell for that. First of all, we have to check if there is an managed account to run the application pool for it, so we can use the command get asp managed account. Whenever you get this error, that means that you are in an environment like PowerShell where the SharePoint add-ons are not installed, so it's not using the SharePoint object model. You can easily add this snap-in with the command add-ps snap-in, and then you use microsoft.sharepoint.powershell and you will have all objects and properties you need for running PowerShell on SharePoint. So let's test it again, and as you can see here, we get the information about all our managed accounts, and yes, we still have 4 managed accounts registered and we will use the ASP service account, so don't have to create a new one. I will save this to a variable because I need it again, and I will get the specific ASP service managed account. The next step is to create a new application pool. First I check if the account has been successfully added to the variable, and then I create a new application pool. Instead of new ASP application pool, you have to use ASP service application pool. You can provide a name for it. This is the display name of the application pool, and you need to provide the account. Okay, I also will store this pool to a variable because I can use this pool later on again. Let's run this, and as you can see, successfully created a new service application pool. Next thing we have to do is we have to create a new subscription setting service, and as you can see here, there is opportunity to create the service application itself and the service application proxy. For the service application, we need an application pool. We provide a name for the service, a database server and a database name.
Next step is that we take also these service to a variable. Okay, so last but not least, we need the subscription setting service proxy. So we will create this one as well. And the only thing it needs as a parameter is the service application we created before. If we run now this command, we will run into an error because we created the application pool in line 6. So checking all the things and run it, and let's see what will be the result. As you can see here, we get this error message I described before. There is an object already with the same name, and it's an object of type application pool. So what we have to do is we first have to check if this application pool is available. If so, we get it. If not, we will create it. So we will change this a little bit, and in our variable $pool, we will get the SP service application pool. And then we ask if this application pool is null, and if so, we will create it new. Now everything should be fine, and if we run the script, we will successfully have created the service. And we will have a look inside our SQL Server and see that there is a new dev subscription service database. And as well, we will have a look in our service applications and we'll see that there is a new dev subscription service and as well a dev subscription service proxy. Again, we have to look if the service of subscription is running. So we have no instance yet, it's stopped. So what we have to do, we just have to start it, and now we also have the subscription service started. Everything is now prepared for running the application, and if we go to our project and click on start, we will see that it takes a little bit, but then we will get another error message. We get the error message, failed to install. Please have a look into the output window. So what we will do is we will navigate to the site itself, have a look if the application is there. No, it is not. So let's test it again. Let's go to the output window and search for the right error message. Here we have something like apps cannot be installed. Apps are disabled on this site. This sounds a little bit better, and we will have a look to this issue next. Whenever you get the error message, apps are disabled on this site, or for example, that the apps could not be installed, failed to install app for SharePoint, you should remember the prerequisites for deploying apps on SharePoint 2013. You might remember that we have different kinds of apps deployed. For example, we can have SharePoint hosted apps or provider hosted apps. And with all of these apps, one thing is in common. They need something like an app web to run on. So for configuring these app webs, we have to configure an app URL, and this app URL can be configured in central administration. And you can see that there is something which is called the app domain and an app prefix. Unfortunately, providing just a name into this app domain field will not work because it is a full qualified domain name, and the DNS has to be configured that also these full qualified domain name and requests to it are really redirected on the right way. So let's switch to DNS and have a look. Here we can see our default domain zone, which is example.local in my case. So we right-click on forward lookup zones and create a new zone. In this case, we keep it on a primary zone, click next, and then we will deploy these to all domain controllers. We only have one domain in the forest, so we can deploy it here. In the next step, we have to provide a zone name, and this zone name should not be the same domain name like the domain name we use primarily in our environment for security reasons. So especially JavaScript and also other scripting technologies are normally secured for cross-domain access. So in our case, we take fancyapps.local, but you can provide the name whatever you want. You just have to configure the DNS properly. In the next step, we say, okay, just let the Active Directory and DNS do dynamic updates, complete the wizard, finish it, and our new zone is created.
So after we now have created the zone, there's only one thing to do in DNS. This is creating a pointer from fancy apps to example. So we will create a new pointer as a CNAME, an alias. Right click on the new domain, click on new alias and CNAME. And we will do that for a wildcard alias name. So we just put in an asterisk, which will create the fully qualified domain name. And we then point this to the example local domain. You either can browse for the domain and the entries there, or if you just know the domain name, you can put it manually in here. So after we have provided all the necessary information, the DNS is set up and we can switch back to our central administration. We can go to configure app URLs and provide the name we created before in the app domain field. In the app prefix field, we can enter just any idea of a prefix we want to have for our domains. So I choose my. After we have done that, we can go back to our Visual Studio project and try to deploy again. This time the deployment will take much more longer and we will succeed by getting prompted on our new web app. Unfortunately, when we get prompted, afterwards we still will have an error message. This time it says the resource cannot be found. We are one step further because we have now our web app created, but we still have to fix this issue. So let's see how we can solve this. First of all, let's check the URL. We can see the prefix, we can see a UI of our app, and we can see our app URL. So everything seems to be fine. Unfortunately, it cannot find the page's default ASPX of this web. So what is the secret behind? When we go to our normal dev example.local website, we can see that the app itself is deployed successfully. A click on this app will then bring us to the error message. So it's calling the app web. The solution is inside IIS. And if we go to IIS and have a look on dev.example.local. So if a request comes onto fancyapps.local domain, it is redirected via DNS to our server, but unfortunately it cannot find it and it's searching it on the default website. What we have to do is we have to stop the default website and set for all IPs a binding to our dev.example.local web application. If we have done so and we try again our solution, we will be prompted again and we can see that it tries to redirect to our app web. And voila, here we go, our app web is working. Just have a look. Yes, the URL is right, and also it finds the page's default ASPX. So last thing to say is congratulations, you successfully established your SharePoint 2013 development environment.
Last but not least, we don't want to end our SharePoint developer career without understanding the mystery of these app web structure and settings. So what we will do is we will have a short look into what's going on behind the scene. First of all, we have to talk about the components which are involved. This is SharePoint, this is IIS and DNS. You might remember that you have a web application, what is also called a host web, dev.example.local, and it is hosted on the IIS side. In addition, we talked about these app web. This app web is only a pointer from DNS. So we created the CNAME, and the CNAME does nothing else than pointing any request to fancyapps.local to the IIS. So what happens now is if you call this app web, the fancyapps.local will redirect to IIS, but because there is no binding, it will try to go to the default site. On the default side, there is nothing. There is no SharePoint, there is no application, it's just normal IIS default site. If we now stop this default site and set the bindings to the host web, the IIS listener redirects it to our host website where it can do the work.
We hope you enjoyed this webcast. For further information, you can get in contact with us via our website www.dti.ch or directly on ask@dti.ch.